Let us pray for peace, justice, especially for those who suffer because of war, unjust war. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Mary, seat of wisdom. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, this morning we reflect on the subject, which is something not of the past, but on the present. Actually, they speak on news all the time about war. War in Iraq, war in Syria, war in Ukraine, a massacre in Kenya. So we are in a state of war. So it is important as a philosopher and as a Christian also to reflect on that phenomenon. It is a permanent phenomenon almost during the whole history of humankind. Remember, Adam and Eve, they have two sons, Cain and Abel. And there was a war between them. Huh? Well, a kind of war, yes. One killed the other. So that is a fact, historical fact. So men, in fact, are we made for war or for peace? Are we created for war or for peace? For peace. Because we have a natural tendency toward happiness, toward the good. So if we are in a state of war, it is something which is not conform to our nature. War is against our nature. We are social animals to live together and not to fight one another. You know? So therefore war is a human social failure. War is entirely man-made affairs caused by, what are the causes of war? You have greed, envy. If you look at the war between France, England, Spain during the 16th, 17th century, as soon as one was too much powerful, the other attacked that country, you know, to create a kind of artificial equilibrium. Envy, hate. Hate. A good example of that is the Nazism during the Second World War. Hate against the Jews, hate against those who are not Aryan, etc. Ambition to be the best, to dominate, to control. Passion. Some war here by vengeance. So it's interesting to know the history, because someone, they see the history of humankind is the history of wars. It is not totally false, but not totally true. Of course, war are very, very important. But war are not the essential of the history of man. And the history of man is man himself taking decision. In fact, war is the fruit of man. It's not the fruit of chance. It's really man who wants to fight, to dominate, to control, and to take the good of others, etc. So because war is destroying people and things, and we can say is not necessary. It is a non-necessary. Someone, they will say, is a necessary evil. Evil. Necessary, I will say no. It is necessary to defend oneself, but it's not necessary to provoke war. So we can say war is doing more wrong than good. And when we have to do something, we have to do the good. So I will say by essence, war is evil. War is evil. And if we go to war because we have no other way to obtain justice or to protect the innocents, you know. In that case, the war is provoked by injustice. In fact, every war is provoked by a kind of injustice. We are injustice. We are unjust when we take the good of others. We are unjust when we kill people, etc. It is not a normal situation. The normal situation of man should be to be in peace, to prosper. Peace is a condition of prosperity. War is a cause of destruction. When we go to war, we destroy. We kill people, we destroy houses, we destroy industry, we destroy the structure of a country. So in fact, it is hurting people. It can accidentally be the cause of material prosperity. For example, the war 1939 to 1945, for America and Canada, it was the cause of a great prosperity. Why? Because of the war, we are obliged to industrialize. We create new structure. And when the war was finished, we used those structure to produce other things. But that is accidental. It's not attached to war. It's not necessary to go to war to prosper, to grow in wealth, for example. Wealth, success is not linked to the destruction of others. In fact, war cannot be a means to success, a means to prosperity. Because war in itself is evil. We cannot use an evil means to attain a good end. Okay? So no war taken as a whole can be justified. War in itself, as a war, as an evil, because create evil, destruction, killing people, cannot be justified in itself. So how a war can be justified? That's the question. Is any war just? Is it possible to have a just war? Why it is not justified? Because war starts from some original injustice. So what are the attitudes in the history, especially since the beginning of the 20th century about war? We have two main attitudes. Those who are for war, we need a strong military power. We call them the militarists. And those who are opposed to that, we call them the pacifists. Peace, and military. So the military are today, for example, a country like North Korea, very, very high. Even here in this country, remember, just before the war in Iraq, there were two currents in the country here. Those who were for diplomacy and those who were to attack. We call the hawks. Those who think the solution is to fight and to impose peace through violence. Those who want to impose peace through dialogue, through diplomacy. And that continues, even today. Today, the question about Russia, for example, the presence of Russia in Ukraine. Those who are for military. So all the NATO, all the countries, we should fight Russia and provoke a third world war. Those who say no, it is better to be patient, to do little steps, diplomacy. Sanction, sanction. We don't kill people, but we make suffer because we don't sell some product to Russia. We don't buy their product, etc. A kind of boycott. Thing about Gandhi. Gandhi is a good example of that. Gandhi is, I think, the model pacifist. And he won a war without using a gun. He expelled the British from India without fighting, in a pacific. So it is possible to attain justice in a pacifist way. So I go to the military here. For them, war is inevitable. We cannot avoid war. It's almost necessary sometimes. Man, you say, well, to justify that, they say, man is aggressive, has an aggressive instinct. Remember when we study ethics, philosophy of man, we study irascible appetite. Do you remember that? The appetite to fight, appetite to conquer, you know. Someone they like, it is a sport. In fact, we have some sport allowing man to fight, box. Imagine boxing. And we punch the nose of the other, that is beautiful. The noble art. So we have aggressive instinct. And when you look at our ancestor, the cavemen, the caveman has a season for hunting. Hunting deer, hunting turkey, hunting also people. You know, a season for war. 2 months of hunting and war. After that, we are quiet. And war most of the time at the end of the crop, so they can take the work, the fruit of the other. You know. In fact, here we have the constant fight between the sedentary and the nomads. Those who are sedentary, for example, in North America, the Huron, the Indian called the Huron, they were sedentary. But the Iroquois, they were more nomads. So every year they fight. They fight to have the crop of the corn, you know, without working. And they fought also to have slaves. To have wives and to have slaves. That is constant. It's not only, you read the history of man, man is a hunter, man is a fighter. Okay? Necessary, in fact, the word man in Latin is the word vir. And the word violence is the word vis. You know? So man is the one who is virile, able to fight, you know, to conquer. Okay. Necessary also for the growth of a nation. They say we cannot grow without fighting. War is for them a normal means. So in every country we have someone, they are more inclined to violence, to military solution than to pacifist solution. The other, what they say violence and bloodshed are immoral. We cannot accept that. They are wrong in themselves. So we cannot use the evil means, the war, to attain a good peace. That is the two theories constantly opposed in the history. Opposed in the history. But we can say that militarism was stressed in a special way at the beginning, since the beginning of the 19th century. And now systematically we have some philosophers who propose war as a mean. They defend war. The first is a philosopher. What is interesting? Not interesting. The majority are German. The first is Fichte. Fichte identify morality with struggle. Struggle. To fight, it is to be moral, and not to fight, it is to be coward. It's to be immoral, and that theory will be taken by Nietzsche after. The second is Hegel. Remember when we study Marxism, Hegel says that contradiction, fight, war is at the core of the society. War is a necessary stage in the passage from peace to victory. It is necessary. We cannot avoid war. And don't forget, he was the official philosopher of the Kaiser of Prussia. And that Kaiser, Prussia was the cause of the war in 1870 and 1914. They were pushed because there was a kind of military thought dominating because of those philosophers, Fichte, Hegel, and the next one, Nietzsche. Nietzsche, the philosopher of the Superman. The Superman before the comic. You know? The strong man. The one who is moral is the one who is strong, and the one who possesses might. So might is right, you know. And that will apply by Nazism. Huh? Hitler. Huh? Because Nazism is a philosophy, it's a philosophy of the superior race. Huh? Okay? The Nazism. And you have also, in 1917, the revolutionary Lenin and Stalin, and you applied in the concrete the theory of Karl Marx, and the theory of Karl Marx is the theory of Hegel. That means revolution is the necessary mean to arrive to progress. Yes.
Now you said this is the beginning of 19th century?
19th, begin, no? That begins in the 19th century up to now.
Wouldn't that be 20th
That is
century?
the 20th century here.
Oh, okay.
But that kind of philosophy, promoting war as a philosopher, it is especially from the time, from those people here. And they are German. That means that there is a kind of mysticism for domination, for fight, you know. And finally, with Hitler in Germany, you have fascism. Fascism in Italy and in Spain, the superiority of a kind of people over other. The war, I speak about the philosopher or the Kant favoring war, using war as a mean, a necessary mean. You know, of course there were many wars before, but not always as a necessary mean. Many times, most of the time, they were provoked. They were necessary to defend because there were some abuses. Okay, so pacifism exists. We have two kinds of pacifism. You know, there is no. When we speak about militarism, when we speak about pacifism, don't think they are, it's only one color. No? It is like a rainbow. We have pacifism, they are absolute pacifism, absolute pacifist. Huh? We have those who are practical pacifists. And we have those who are in the middle. Absolute, they condemn all war. No war, not at every war. If they attack your country, you have not to defend yourself. But that is absolute. Absolute pacifism. It's an attitude adapt most of the time for religious reasons. A good example of that is the Amish. And those who are inspired by the fact we never attack another. We can support, we can endure, but we don't react. That is absolute. Okay? Those who are practical, you know, without attempt at philosophical justification. And the example of practical pacifism, the model, is Gandhi. Gandhi in India. That is the model of the practical pacifism. War will be impossible if people refuse to fight. For example, in India, when Gandhi proposed the boycott of the British product, and he proposed pacifism, you know, people, many Indians, thousands of Indians were beaten by the British army or by the Indian army. I saw a movie about that. They were horrible. And it's the same for those in the Alabama, you know, during the 1965, the March for Peace and for Justice, for equality of right. Many were beaten with this, but they were pacifist. They sit down on the street, they were beaten, but they did not move, you know. Finally, the British, what they said in India, we cannot beat 500 million people. So they stopped. It's the same with Dorothy Day. I spoke about Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day was a pacifist and she manifested against the war in Vietnam. And 20 times she was put into jail. 20 times. But she was so popular, she was in the newspaper everywhere. So the next time the police say, don't touch Dorothy Day. Don't put her into jail and not Dorothy Day. You know? So that is that kind of pacifism here. Huh? So violence must be met by non-violence. Is the theory of Martin Luther King. Exactly that. Huh? By the active non-violence resistance and non-cooperation. Non-cooperation. So if in any country the people decide not to buy a product because the product is made by a country is in war with another country or is doing evil, we stop. They will go into bankruptcy. You know, the pro-life movement, what they say, they try to find those who favor, who finance abortion, who finance birth control, and they said, don't buy your product, don't put your money in that bank, etc. It is a kind of pacifist action. Yes, brother.
My question has to do, like, maybe you'll talk about this, but when, you know, they attacked the Twin Towers, and there was kind of that whole movement where a lot of people were just like, not the pacifists or the militarists, like everyone was like, the whole country was just like in an uproar to do something about it. But then when we're at war, everyone wants to be off. But in that situation, like, there needs to be a justice, because there's an injustice of, but I don't know, like, what's the...
Okay. Here you touch a problem, important problem. When there is an injustice, we have to repair that injustice. Okay? So if you attack in a innocent, without any reason, they destroy your towers, for example, they destroy something in your country, we have to reclaim for justice. But the problem is how. We can, you know, okay, they killed 3,000 people. If you go to war, if you launch an atomic bomb on those countries, we will kill thousands and thousands and thousands. You know, we see that soon. It is in the paragraph. But that's the condition for a just war, for a just claiming of my right. If I claim my right and the consequences are horrible, sometimes I have the duty to sacrifice my right for the community. Sometimes. Not always. That is a question of prudence. Huh? And it is the application of what? I gave you a text about that. React with a double effect. Huh? So we'll come back on that, okay? Because the Catholic Catechism, number 2309, 2209, huh? 2209, gives you a very important, explanation how we can react in front of injustice. You know, as a Christian, I can say, go to the gospel, what Jesus said. You know, in fact, he never called to vengeance. Huh? But we can, as a Christian, reclaim justice. Okay, well, we come back on that. It's a good question. It is a real problem. Huh? For example, we see today Christians killed by hundreds. Huh? So how, you know? But don't forget, in Rwanda, there were 1,400,000 killed. And nobody moved. And they let them kill. Cambodia, 1.5 million killed by Pol Pot. Nobody moved. That, you know, sometimes we are military, but because we are afraid of the consequence of the war, we are practical pacifists. It is exactly what happened now with Syria. Nobody dared to intervene directly because everybody is afraid of a universal war. Huh? So there is something good, something bad in that also. You remember Hitler in 1933, 35, 36, when he began to invade Renania. And the British and the French did not want to fight. So they let Hitler enter. Hitler said, if I had been opposed, I will have stopped there. But because he was not opposed, he continued. He went to south of Czechoslovakia, he occupied Austria, and after that he began by destroying Poland. It was the beginning of the war. You know, pacifism is good, but we must also be realistic. Okay, so that is the third one, relative pacifism. They object for a certain kind of war. They don't object for war. But for example, they will oppose nuclear war. They will oppose the usage of gas, you know. In fact, they will, toxic gas, they will oppose more the means than the war itself. Huh? They recognize the necessity of the war to attain some justice, but they say, be careful, don't use a bomb to kill a mosquito. Huh? You understand that? I mean, when I want to kill a mosquito, I don't use a bomb. So that means sometimes the danger, it is to provoke something huge. And look at 1914, when they killed the Archduke of Austria, Ferdinand. Huh? That there was the pretext to enter to war. You know? And nobody thought at that time the war will last 4 years and millions of people will be killed. They thought it was a question of 1 or 2 weeks. But the consequences were horrible. So, you know, only to revenge for the honor of a country, to provoke a universal war. It was the First World War, 1914. So now we know that the consequence of that. You know? It's exactly what the bishop, American bishop, wrote, the letter they wrote to George Bush when he wanted to enter in war with Iraq. You have the text. You have the text with you. Okay, we'll come back on that. So, in fact, the pacifists, the moderate pacifists, relative pacifists, don't oppose to any war, but they oppose to the usage of certain armament, certain the means. Now, another part of the chapter, second, how we can justify war? Is war something that morally we can accept and we can participate in? Well, you know what is interesting? In 1914, we have French allied and we have German and allied. Huh? And we are Catholic on both sides. And the bishop here blessed the armament, the weapon, and the bishop he blessed the weapon. They were blessed on both sides. They received the blessing on both sides. Even last war, the Cardinal Spellman, they blessed the armament. Okay, so first war is to be regretted. We should regret that war exists. We shall not be happy with that. And the danger today is people like war. Children, boys like war. Why? Because the games they play the whole day are on war. No? Kill, 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 kill. Imagine you do that for years, for the age of 12 to the age of 18. And now 18, they go on their computer, and they say an invitation by ISIS to fight and to kill in reality. As the most they can come, we use you. And they are happy. American, British, French, they go there. Good boys, good family. They are not Muslim. They go there, why? Because they like to war. You know, if we play a game, because you like that, no? Except examination. You don't like my game. But the other game... No, but think about that. That is horrible. We put in the mind of children, very young, the taste of killing. And when they grow, they continue, and when they have an opportunity, you know the danger of the virtual world, at a certain time we cannot distinguish between what is virtual and what is real. And that is incredible. They stop young girls, 14 years old, going to ISIS. American girl, with good parents, with a Christian name. They want to fight, to have fun. They don't go because they believe in Allah. You know? And they are hundreds and thousands they go there. That is, we prepare a generation of fighters. They fight virtually, but when they have a gun, they don't make the difference between what is virtual and what is real. How many crime, how many murders in high school? Since Sandy Hook, at least 90 attacks of high school and universities in Sandy Hook in Connecticut here. So that means if we have a cult for war, we recall what we saw. If we saw a taste for war to games, we are not surprised that young American, young British, young French, young Australian, they want to fight with ISIS against their own country. But some occasion can arrive in which war is inevitable. If you are attacked, we have the principle of self-defense. That is a duty. You have the duty to defend yourself and your children and your country. Imagine a father, he has 2 children and a dog is attacking his children. What is the duty of the father? To fight the dog, to defend the life of each other. It's the same for my country is attacked unjustly. I have to participate in that. It is a duty, a duty. So even I will say something, maybe it will surprise you. My opinion, my conviction from studying the history of the world, pacifism, absolute pacifism, can be very dangerous. I gave you an example. North Africa, North Africa, Italy here, all that up to this about 600 years after Jesus Christ, all that was Christian. A very prosperous, beautiful city, well organized, like Rome. All that, but they were pacifists. They did not insist on war. You know why? Because they were protected by Constantinople. Today, Constantinople is Istanbul. Constantinople opposed Muslims. But the day Constantinople was invaded by the barbarian from the north, after that they became very weak. And now after that the Muslims entered through Constantinople and they invaded all that here. All that was very high civilization. It was the same level as Rome, the same level. On both sides of the Mediterranean was the same. University, library, they have aqueduct for water, everything. You know, pacifism is dangerous. There is a proverb in Latin, civis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare war. Para, prepare. If you want peace, prepare war. That means, you know, we are in a world where greed instead of domination is everywhere. It is in every person. We have that. We have to fight. We call that selfishness, no? And when selfishness becomes about money, about possession, we call that greed. and we want to conquer, to possess, to dominate. Another thing also put into evidence by some psychologists, psychiatrists like Adler and Jung. Huh? It is the will to power. We have an instinct of domination. Put 10 little boys and girls together without adults. What will happen? One wants to run the business, no? And see if they have two, they will fight to run the business. No? Think about when you are 6 years old, 7 years old, 5 years old, and you play together. Someone they want to dominate, to control. Huh? It's not only on business, it is in politics. Politics is the same. It's a fight, it's a war. It is so we have an instinct of domination, instinct of possession. Because of that, we must be attentive to protect our borders, to protect our interest. It is a duty. I will say it is a duty to have a minister of defense. But it's interesting. In some countries, they call the minister of war. In other countries, they call that the minister of defense. For example, in France, for a long time, the minister in charge of defense was called the ministre de la guerre, the minister of war, huh? El ministro de la guerra, you know, the one who is to fight, to prepare to fight. Others say no, minister of defense, to defense. At least I think it's necessary for every country to have a minimum of defense. So pacifism, in my opinion, does not exclude common sense. Common sense, you know, if we are not protected, anybody can attack your country and take your country. Is the reason why some countries, when they are not strong military, they put together, they create a union together, like in Africa, for example, many countries now are together to fight against the problem. In some countries, they go there, you know. Okay. I give another example, pacifism can be dangerous. In 1933, or 1938, a ship filled with more than 2,000 Jews who escaped from Germany arrived in the port, harbor of New York, to ask American government to be accepted as refugee. And the American government is not no. They went to Cuba. Cuba said no. Finally, nobody wanted to take them. They came back to Hamburg, Germany, and they were taken by the Gestapo and they disappeared. Why the American government did not want to take them? Because at that time, up to 1941, the American government was favorable to peace. And to be favorable to peace was to be favorable to Hitler. So they did not have a problem with Hitler. We don't want to have a war as we had in 1914, you know. So it was pacifism. Nobody won, but those people were condemned to death because of that. Huh? The same attitude in 1936, 37, 38, in England, in France, there was a very powerful current against war. Pacifism, pacifism. At the same time, people know that Hitler invaded Renania, invaded south of Czechoslovakia, Austria. They know them, but they don't want to. What happened? On the 1st of September, they were obliged to declare war to Hitler because Hitler crushed Poland. You know? It was too late. So, you know, pacifism is good, but I will say not absolute pacifism. It is necessary for a country to have a kind of defense. It is necessary for New York, for Cromwell to have police. To protect the population, no? Not to dominate the people, to protect the people. They are the defense of the country. To assure the internal peace of the country, internal stability of the country, because that is the common good of the citizen. So it is a necessary evil, I would say, to have an army, to have military. It is necessary. But the first end is not to attack. The first end is to defend the country. Huh? Okay? So war in itself is a physical evil, huh? But is also a moral evil if it is caused by injustice. So yeah, when you fight, you have A and B. Huh? So if A fight against B, there must be one who is unjust and the other try to repair, to restore the injustice. So war is always provoked by some unjust situation. But the one who defends himself is justified because of the common good. Huh? So now we arrive to the central question. What are the conditions for a just war? And you have that in the letter of your bishop. I give you that letter. AA1, you have that. The letter, bishop's letter of 2 years President Bush on Iraq. I go to the bottom, the fourth paragraph. The fourth paragraph. There are no easy answers. People of goodwill may apply ethical principles and come to different prudential judgment, depending upon their assessment of the facts at hand and other issues. Before taking a decision, we must know clearly what is the situation. Who is the unjust aggressor? And who is the unjust aggressed? Very important. We conclude, based on the facts that are known to us, that the preemptive unilateral use of force is difficult to justify at this time. Because the United States at that time were alone. Nobody in Europe wanted to attack immediately. They wanted to verify further situation. In fact, they were right because it was proved after that all that was not true. And secondly, they say try diplomatic or economic sanction. Huh? So, you know, you need preemptive. That means to prevent the other to attack me, I will attack him. Because that's a preemptive war. Preemptive. And secondly, unilateral. Will not need the strict condition of a Catholic teaching for overriding the strong presumption against the use of military war. Of particular concern are the traditional war criteria. And here the bishop quote, you have that in the catechism, exactly the same thing, number 3209. And first, the just cause, you know, the just cause. And go to the last line of the, is there clear and adequate evidence of a direct connection between Iraq and attack of September 11? Or clear and adequate evidence of imminent attack of a grave nature? We continue, huh? Is it wise to dramatically expand traditional moral and legal limits on the just cause to include preventing or use of military force to overthrow threatening regimes to deal with the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction? Should not a distinction be made between effort to change unacceptable behavior of a government and effort to end that government existence? Is different. To change the conduct of a government or to destroy that government. The second, legitimate authority. The moral credibility of the use of military force also depends heavily on whether there is a legitimate authority for using force to topple the Iraqi government to oppose. Huh? In our judgment, decision, that is very important, decision such gravity require compliance with the U.S. constitutional imperative, broad consensus within our nation, and some form of international sanction preferably by the UN Security Council. And they say, don't go to war alone. Don't go to war alone. And now, you know what the consequence of that? It is the situation. We destabilize the system, and now everything is destabilized, and we pay for that. The third condition, probability of success and proportionality. The use of force must have a serious prospect for success and must not produce evil and disorder graver than the evil to be eliminated. Against Iraq could have unpredictable consequences. Read that it was a prophecy, not only for Iraq, but for peace and stability elsewhere in the Middle East. You underline that, because it is exactly what the bishop wrote here. It's exactly what is happening now. What is happening now in Syria, in all those countries, Afghanistan, all the consequences of that here. Would preventive force succeed in thwarting, stopping serious threat, or instead provoke a very kind of attack that is intended to prevent? In fact, the results are worse than the good we take from that. You know, when they say they took off the statue of Saddam Hussein, yeah, we see the war is over, we won the war. It was only the beginning of the problem. How would another war in Iraq impact the civilian population? And now we know that thousands of people die or suffer because of that, even now, today. In the short and long term, how many more innocent people will suffer and die? Because when we go to war, we have to respect the civilian population. We cannot destroy everything. That was the big crime Allied committed on Dresden in 1945, just before the end of the war. They did not use atomic bomb, but they used thousands of phosphorant bombs. You know, phosphorus is when it is it is in fire, it's like a liquid. So you throw a bomb, for example, on St. Philip. St. Philip is a bunker, okay. But the bomb is liquid. So the phosphorus is going everywhere, even in the cellar. And people who are hidden, they were killed, they were cooked, burned because of phosphorus. 250 maybe people die in one night. More than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But it is very rare we speak about that in our books of history. It is one of the worst even. The Allied did not touch armament, did not touch industry, they touched the city. The most beautiful city in Europe, Dresden. And they did not touch the same in Nagasaki. In Nagasaki, the bomb fell exactly on the Catholic mission, St. Francis Xavier, founded by St. Francis Xavier, on the Catholic University, and those who suffered the most were the Catholic. It did not touch the industrial. And you know what? Somebody after the war, they said, it was on purpose not to destroy the economic structure. Because if we destroy that, after that, we have to renew that. We call that Machiavellism. The end justified the means. You know, when we study the war, we must see both sides. It's not white on one side and black on the other. There's black and white on both. And Dresden, it is one of the big, I will say, mistake. But you know, when you have thousands of bombers letting bombs falling on civilian people, it is not by chance. Excuse me. It's not by chance. Otherwise, our pilots were very stupid. They have the mission to destroy, to frighten, so after the war will stop. But if it was there, it should, and the Pope said in the text here, Catholic, respect the civilian population. They are innocent. Why we kill innocent and we don't kill those who are responsible to make bombs and those things? That is the history. We must know that. Why we must know that? Not to renew the same mistake. Not to do the same stupidity our ancestors did in the past. But you know, we don't want to know the history. We don't know. We want only to see the future. History begins by myself. Myself and I. Before me, I don't take care of that. Is the reason why in many countries now history is no more taught. Or history is taught, but we take off, for example, what is not good. For example, in Great Britain, a few years ago, the new book for history, they were not talking about the Shoah, about the extermination of 6 million Jews, because there are a lot of Muslims in England, a lot of Muslims. So not to offend the Muslim, they suppress what it was one of the worst crime of the war. You know? They don't speak about that. We say history is elective. Do you know what happened in 1812? Well, somebody answered me last year. The British, they burned the Capitol in Washington. It's true. But why? Nobody was able to answer that. Because Americans, they burned the Parliament of Toronto before, Yorktown. It was a retirement. It was the war between British, Canada, and United States. We don't speak about that. In Canadian book, we speak about that. You know? History is very touchy. Huh? We try to find what is favorable. We avoid. For example, when you study history, did you study the participation of the American army in the persecution in Mexico in 1925, 26, 28? Those who killed the Christians, 3,000 priests were killed. Huh? And how many? They were sustained by the American army. Those things are not, we don't speak about those things, you know. We must know the history because we renew the same mistake. And finally, the norm governing the conduct of war, especially the respect of the civilian and the respect of the prisoner. Before the Red Cross, what we did with the prisoner, we used someone to exchange, and with the other, what they did? They killed them. Why they killed them? Because they have to be fed. So it was the way. Before 1850, many prisoners, the fact they were taken a prisoner, they were condemned to death. So the Red Cross and the international community create some law to protect against war. So there are the four conditions: a lawful authority, a just cause, a rightful intention, and finally, a right to use the good means. So you have the text of your bishop, and you have the text of the Catholic Catechism on 2309. That is the condition of war. You know why we speak about that here? Because as a Christian, we must know what is the position of the moral Christian ethics about that subject. And the Catholic Catechism is very clear. If you read the number 3:23:9 to 23:15, you have the essential of that. And if ever among you become a chaplain in the army, you must know that also. In fact, we should know what is the position of the church in regard of war. As peace. Next class, we study peace. But to study peace, I think we have to understand what is the injustice of war. And if you go now to some statistic I gave you, you have that text here. You have that, huh? Okay, take it. You know, I was surprised myself when I read that. It's an old text I found. It is only 2004, Afghanistan. Look at all the participation, military participation. Who pays for that? You know, when a young American, a baby is born, he has a debt of $20,000 for war.
Wow.
That means every American has a debt of $20,000. look on the other side. On the other side. You have a pie. And that pie indicates a large part is for what? But we have a part for the old war, a part for the actual war. You know, when you send a carrier in the Red Sea to protect interest of the Allies, American interest, that is very expensive. A plane is only one plane is expensive. I remember 30 years ago there was a man called Mr. Follow. He was the president of the International Organization Against Leprosy. Leprosy. He was and he asked United States and USSR to give only one plane, combat plane, only one. He said, with that I can heal all the lepers in the world. That means it's very expensive. Very expensive. And what is expensive? More and more, it becomes more and more sophisticated. No? So the arm made 20 years ago, now they are not they have to be updated. So we have to create new and new and new. That is very expensive. And the consequence of that, they are obliged to cut. But there is a dilemma here. If you stop, suppose we stop preparing the defense, what will happen for us? You know, here we see that war is essentially evil. That means, even if you want to defend a good cause, it is provoking a lot of problems, even inside the country who is preparing for war. Because a large part of the budget is not given to education, is not given to health, is given to war. And another problem also is the interest of the war. I remember a few years ago, Peter Jennings, he was the anchorman in NBC at that time. He said, today I have a good news. Very rare on television, they say, I have a good news. He said, I have a good news to communicate to you. Today, we finished to pay the debt of the Civil War. Today, we finished to pay the debt of the Civil War. That means we have to pay the debt, but also the interest of the debt. The interest of the debt. That means all those here, you see, all those participation, you have to pay for that. So finally, who pays? It's Joe Blow. Each of us will pay for that. So we cannot say, a war is not my business. War is my business because I am concerned directly by that. A large part of my work, my effort go to that. And not only to pay for now, but to pay for the past. For example, the veterans who fought, gave their life, and they risked their life. It is just we pay for them. But that is very expensive. There's only one aspect. Huh? You have to pay the interest. And who control your debt? China and Arabia Saudi. Because they know, Chinese are not, they are very wise. They say, okay, we pay the debt of American and now we can control them. In fact, now we are the objective ally of Chinese. And China is very interested as the United States continue to be in good health. You know, if I buy a cow, I want the cow to be in good health to give me milk. You understand that? You understand why now? When you go to Walmart, you go to Target, you go to many places, even to Vatican City, you turn your statue, your beautiful image of the Sacred Heart, it is written, made in China. And you cannot stop that. Because they control a part of your economy. They control so much that even the most sophisticated industry, even Germany, they are now installed in China. Westinghouse, General, they are there. So that is the situation. All that is linked. When you look at that, we see What can we do? Can I do something for that? So we see that next class when we study so I go to the text of the Catechism. I will take that text here, Catechism. Yeah. By the way, the agenda is excellent. The agenda, Article 10, especially here, excellent. Why it is excellent? Because it is the text of the popes, of the council, the text themselves. You have the authentic there. And here, Catechism, what they do, they take the essential and they give you the reference. I think you have the reference at the end. Okay? You have the references, the source of information, and that is important for you. So I go to number 2306, first page. 2206. Those who renounce violence and bloodshed in order to safeguard human rights make use of these means of defense available to the weakest. Bear witness to evangelical charity provided they do so without harming the right and obligation of other men in society. So the ideal is to obtain justice without doing evil to doing something bad. They bear legitimate witness to the gravity of the physical and moral risk of recourse to violence, with all its destruction and death. And you have the reference for that. If you go to next number, 3207, the fifth commandment forbids to kill because of the evils and injustice that accompany all war. Even a legitimate war provokes some injustice, even for those who are benefiting that. For example, USSR, now in the past, they tried to expand their ideology in the world, in Africa, in South America. But who paid for that? The Russians. So the Russians were obliged to sacrifice many things in such a way that the help forward for expanding that ideology goes everywhere. Nobody is except those who make arms. The problem is there. Those who make guns produce that they take benefit of that. You know, the richest industry in every country is the armament and the industry, weapon. It is the richest. Because think about the cost only of one plane. The cost only on one little ship, destroyer, for example. That is money. That takes a lot of little Joe Blow money to make that. That means everybody in the country is affected by that. Is the reason why everybody should reflect on that. I go to number 2309, the strict conditions, and you have that. The first, an unjust aggressor. The damage inflicted by the aggressor of the nation or community must be lasting, grave, and certain. That is the argument the bishop, American bishop, they use against the war in Iraq. They say you are not certain. In fact, they were right because after the war, now we know it was not true. That it was a pretext. So that uncertain. If we are not, we must never act when we are not certain. In that case, when we have to do something wrong, evil. Secondly, all other means of putting an end to it must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. When we try diplomacy, we try boycott, we try economic sanction. Okay, let us go, but it is at the end. 3, we must serious prospect of success. It is what your American bishop said to Mr. Bush. We have no certitude, and I'm sure the consequence will be worse than the benefit. You will get rid of one man, as Saddam Hussein, and you will see the consequence of that. And now we know that. It was exactly the same situation with the Taliban in the time the Soviets were fighting the Taliban. You know that, huh? The Taliban were armed, they were formed by Americans. And today, the same weapon, the same formation are used against Americans. And that is, if we did not put our feet in that, it was, you know, at that time it was that the war between the East and the West was not direct, it was by an intermediary. And that is a good example. And now we pay for that. We pay for that on both sides. The Russians pay for that and we pay for that also. And we are not at the end of the problem. The problem is for many, many, many years. So when you look at the history, it will have been much better not to put our feet in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And it is exactly what your bishop wrote. You know, they are inspired by the Holy Spirit. They were inspired by the Holy Spirit. Because their letter is almost a prophecy. It's a prophecy. And finally, the use of arms must not produce evils, and these are the graver than the evil we want to eliminate. If we kill 1,000 people to kill only one general, that is without proportion, you know. So it's the reason why we should not bomb, kill civilians as we did in Dresden, as we did in Hiroshima, as we did in Nagasaki. I say we because the Allies, not the Americans, or all the Western world. We were together, don't forget that. So we are solidarity in the responsibilities. Okay, so I go to number 10, 2210. Public authorities in this case have the right and duty to impose on citizens the obligatory and necessary for national defense. So it can be an obligatory service. It can be also some taxes, especially for defense. And number 11, public authorities should make equitable provision for those who, for reasons of conscience, because consciousness objector, refuse to bear arms. These are not less obliged to serve the human community in some other way. You know, the objector of conscience, they cannot say, I am neutral. No. Okay, you don't want to fight, but you can be a nurse. In the first war, in the second war in France, priests and seminarians and religious were not obliged not everyone to go on, especially priests, because in the canon law, priests must not kill. So, because of that, the French government, when they obliged priests to go to war, they gave them some function not on the front. For example, Father Teilhard de Chardin was a nurse. They were those who run ambulance, go to the dying, etc. But they had to participate. It is, for example, during the time of war, we are controlling our food. We have stamps. Stamps, for example, we are to buy meat. We cannot have metal. I remember during the Second War, our toys were made with wood. Only wood. Because metal, plastic, all that one was sent to the war. So during 4 or 5 years, we have only a train made with wood. Everything was made with wood or cotton. You know? It was a participation of the war. You know? So that is, we cannot isolate ourselves. If I am a country, it is important as a priest. Because your parishioner, if there is a war, for example, in 1965, when there was obligatory military participation of part of the population to the war, you know, those who were obliged to go in the military service, many were, the parishioners were Catholic. How we can deal with that, you know? We must have some clear principle about what is war, what is our participation of war, etc. And next paragraph, the church and human reason both assert the permanent validity of the moral law during armed conflict. That means we cannot use any means to win. We must respect the human person. We must respect the truth, etc. We must respect God also. Next paragraph. Non-combatant, wounded soldier and prisoner must be respected. Civilian population. And that paragraph is very important. Action deliberately contrary to the law of nations, and its universal principle are crimes, as are the orders that command such action. Next paragraph, next sentence. Blind obedience does not suffice to excuse those who carry them out. You read the Nuremberg trial. You remember trial. After the war, there was Nuremberg trial. Nuremberg in Germany. So Nuremberg, they judged the criminal of war, a war criminal. And the argument of the lawyer was, they are not guilty because they obey. And what was the conclusion of the judges of many countries? They say, even if you are a soldier, you have always your conscience. You must always first obey your conscience. And many soldiers obey their conscience and they refuse and they were executed. You know that. You know, we must not think that every German accepted to follow Hitler. We had at least 3,000 priests were put into jail, sent to concentration camp because they refused to obey Hitler. You know? So I have always to obey my conscience. That is tough. I cannot say, they asked me, I obey, I kill without, no. Strictly speaking, I should, and many soldiers did that, many opposed, and they prefer to be killed than to kill others. And finally, number 14, every act of war directed to the indiscriminate destruction of all cities and vast area with their inhabitants is a crime against God and man. So I spoke about Nagasaki, Hiroshima, I speak about Dresden. So a danger of mortal warfare is that we use the atomic, biological, chemical weapon. Is that the problem with Iran now? Because Iran wants to use nuclear power. But when you have nuclear power, you can produce bombs and can destroy Israel, for example. Can destroy, New York. It's not necessarily the bomb it can be in a truck. It can be in a plane, and the bombs, poof, So that is the reality in which we live. Listen to CNN, listen to NBC, listen to news. We are in state of war. Terrorism is not the past, it is now. So, what are the conditions? No? So you can read that and, be a moderate pacifist. No? That means we have to defend our country, we have to defend injustice, we have to protect the weakest, but at the same time we will not use any kind of means. It will be very easy to stop ISIS. We send an atomic bomb on that, finish. Maybe we'll kill the 50,000 members of ISIS, or we'll kill maybe 3 million people. That is the problem. Okay, God bless.